From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Banshee, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joel Mitchell. How are you today, Joel?
It's still raining, Jason.
I know. Seriously, this has got to be one of the signs of the apocalypse, right? Like a week or two straight of rain in Perth.
I mean, it's just water. It's not like fish or frogs or anything.
Might as well be. Like it's just as rare.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's quite bizarre. Yeah, how have you been faring, I guess, with all the wetness? Not been able to go outside and work on your tan?
Yeah, because I'm so tan otherwise.
Yeah, you're Polynesian descent and all.
Well, mostly the issue is that we have, along the saga of Joelle's apartment, it turns out that our complex, the materials that we used for the roof are not spec'd for the angle of the roof. And we've been having basically water leaking into our ceiling every winter for as long as we've lived there. And finally they've had an actual proper roofing company look at it and go, oh, well, this is the problem. So basically they have to replace the roof on our entire complex.
Wow.
And that was supposed to start last week.
Probably a good time to start.
No. Right. So, basically now we're waiting for that, for a window of rainless weather.
Yep.
So that they can do that. And then we'll have to have our bathroom ceiling replaced because it just keeps getting mold growing inside it because there's a constant leak into our bathroom ceiling.
Oh, this is sounding a lot like 2022. Oh, 2021.
I hope not. I hope that this is not nowhere near as bad as 21.
All our original listeners are going, hey.
Yeah, I know. Hooray. Joelle's life is turning upside down again. Whoopee.
You're going to chat with listeners of the show and they'll ask you, have you got a bed?
Yeah.
And then they'll be, have you got a roof?
Yeah, do you have a roof? Yeah. So, we'll see. They've done a schedule of because, we're top floor, so we're technically in the drop zone.
Yeah.
So there's, I think, 1 or 2 days where we have to be out by 7 a.m. So I don't know how we're going to manage that.
Must be nice living in the penthouse. Sounds like, you and Alicia have the same issues with when rain is not great on the particular building issue that you've got.
Yeah, I mean, at least I can still sleep while it's raining, which is a bigger issue for Alicia. Yeah, so we will see what happens.
I'm looking forward to following this saga.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Hopefully
we needed some more drama in your life.
Yeah, hopefully they can get started at the end of this week, though, and it's supposed to be, sort of 2 weeks to get it all done, so we shall see. Hopefully.
Well, look, our guest has been waiting patiently, so we should probably let him in.
Yep.
He is the author of 4 books and the host of the Caring CEO podcast, so a fellow podcast host. He's got a lived experience of depression informing his work. He's a board director of RUOK and co-founder of We Care 365. Welcome to the podcast, Graeme Cowan.
Lovely to join you, Jason and Joelle.
Yeah, great to have you on, mate. We've wanted to have you on for a while, and just turns out that the timing's perfect that we can do this to do alongside RUOK Day in September.
Really fantastic timing. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, terrific.
So, Graeme, one of the questions that we ask all of our guests before we get into the meat of the podcast is, what are your favourite podcasts?
There's probably 3 that I listen to regularly, and one of those is the Tim Ferriss Show, and I like that because it looks at high performance in all sorts of different areas. So there's a lot of deep diving there, which I find really interesting. Also like Jonathan Fields with the Good Life Project. He just talks about how to have a good life and a meaningful life and do the work that's really important to you. Love that. And then the final one that I also listen to is Jay Shetty. He's a lot on personal well-being and, relationships, all sorts of elements of well-being. So they're probably the 3 that I listen to the most.
Yeah, good. Some new ones there for our listeners to tune into. That's great.
Yeah, a couple of those haven't been mentioned before.
Yeah. So, Graeme, can you tell us, please, about your professional career?
Yeah, it's sort of been an evolution. I sort of started off working in marketing, and I worked with multinationals like Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer organisation. I then moved into recruitment, and so I was recruiting for about 5 years, and then headed up a culture change consultancy where we worked with organisations endeavouring to grow and evolve their culture. And then I worked as an executive search, and it was in that role I worked for the management consulting company Carney. And it was in that role that there was a really big correction, and it was in the tech wreck in 2000. And I was doing a lot of work in that industry, and it just crashed. And very soon after, I crashed myself, and I went through a really bad episode of depression. I lost my job, my marriage broke down. I had to go and live with my parents for a while. And that was obviously a very, very difficult year. I was out of work for 5 years. And so I got to really understand how important work is to our well-being. And then my pathway out was just really deciding to walk regularly. And again, walking regularly every day. I had good medical advice. And it was reconnecting with family and friends that I'd sort of isolated myself from when I felt ashamed that I was going through this. And then I guess the final part was writing my first book, Back from the Brink. And this, I saw as a sense of purpose, to find some meaning out of the real suffering I'd been through. And so I interviewed 12 well-known and everyday Australians who'd been through really tough adversity, and found out how they did it, what worked for them. And I launched it at the Black Dog Institute in Sydney, and there was a lot of publicity. I did about 130 interviews over a month period in radio, TV and print. And the thing that really came home to me from that is that it was actually the loved ones of the people that were reaching out. And that was a real epiphany for me, because I didn't realise how much my illness had affected my loved ones. And so that led to my second book, Back from the Brink 2, which is that one there. And that was how best to help your loved one overcome depression. And then I did an international version of Back from the Brink. And I interviewed, Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's chief advisor, Patrick Kennedy, who was nephew of JFK, and people around the world that had gone through really tough times and found out what worked for them. But perhaps the biggest thing that came out of it was surveying 4,064 people to find out what worked best in their recovery. And I wasn't looking for a silver bullet. And what finally came up was, a framework which standard for I care. And so the I is how you identify someone who's struggling. C is for compassion, how you use compassion to ask, are you okay, with empathy. A is for access experts, help them find the help they need. R is for revitalising work, knowing that working is actually good for people and they're better off being connected with their workmates than sitting at home by themselves. And E is for exercise. And so then, for the last 10 years, I've been spoken to, thousands of people about how to build more mentally healthy and resilient teams. And then, 4 years ago, I evolved a new business called We Care 365, which is scaling what I've done along the way. And back in 2009, that was just after my second book had come out, I met Gavin Larkin, the founder of RUOK, and he had this idea, and from my own experience, I just knew it was right, because I knew how important that the support I got from my parents was to my recovery. I probably wouldn't have made it without their support. And so, with 4 of us, with no budget, no employees. We launched the first Are You OK in Canberra in Parliament House, and here we are, 13 years later, and it's just extraordinary how it's grown in reach and impact, and very, very rewarding.
Fantastic. That leads us nicely into Jason's question, I think.
Yeah. It's great to hear from someone with lived experience on the show. We don't have many. Usually it's from the realms of practitioner-led or academic-led. But most people know you, Graeme, as co-founder of Are You OK? It's a very well-known campaign in Australia, but particularly for our international audience who might not have heard of it before. Can you explain a little bit about what the campaign's all about? Yeah,
sure. And Gavin Lark, we consider the founder. He tragically passed away in 2011 from cancer. And so we want that to be his legacy. But I was one of the, people in that first year that really, there was only 4 of us that really helped to launch it. But for our international guests, Gavin tragically lost his father, Barry, from suicide. And Barry was quite a mercurial man. He was an ex-McKinsey consultant. He was a close confidant to 3 of Australia's richest businessmen at the time, Kerry Packer, John Singleton, and Jerry Harvey. And he just had this idea, really, that it had been, I think, 15 years, 20 years before, but it was still having implications all those years later. And so Gavin was having to explain to his son, who never knew the grandfather, how his father died or grandfather died. So he had that real regret of losing his father to suicide. And I had supreme relief because during my battle, I attempted suicide and just was so glad that, I didn't put my family through the same thing. So through that really shared experience, we had this real drive for the mission of the organisation. And the mission of the organisation is a conversation could change a life. And everyone can relate to that. We could have had a National Suicide Prevention Day and it wouldn't have gone anywhere. But the beauty about, Gavin's vision is that everyone can relate to it. Everyone can relate to needing to ask, are you okay at times, but also understanding the benefit of you being asked, are you okay? And, as I said, we started from very, very humble beginnings, but, we now have unprompted awareness at close to 87%. And I think it's the latest figures, about 26% have asked someone, are you okay, in the last year. So it's just grown dramatically.
Yeah, it's quite the campaign now. It's very well known in Australia. We're really interested, though, in, I guess, workplaces on this particular podcast. So we know that workplaces engage in Are You OK? How is that typically done?
Well, it's interesting you ask, because in that first year, we were juggling so many balls. But I said to Gavin, I think we need to do a workplace version. And he said, well, I've got no capacity. If you want to do something, reach out and do it. So what I did was to reach out to about 5 colleagues and just really brainstormed how we'd launch it in an organisation. And one of the people piked up and said, well, it'd be great if we could launch it saying, we've already got these people on board. And we only had 2 weeks. So we challenged everyone who knew a CEO to reach out and have that conversation about, this is about helping prevent suicide, but more, it's about having more support around us. And in 2 weeks, we got, 27 companies to agree on that first year. So when we launched it, people were much more willing to come on board. And then the first year went up to 350 organisations participated. And that's just grown in evolution. And I'd really encourage people to have a look at the website, ruok.org.au, because there's some really fabulous resources there now. There's resources for schools, there's resources for workplaces. And with the workplace one, there's some terrific things there, about how to be an Are You OK champion, how to build an Are You OK culture across an organisation, and lots of resources on how to have that conversation. We talk about the ALEC 4-step approach, which is ask someone, are they okay? Listen without judgment, encourage action, and then check in to see if they've, taken the action which they said they're going to take. And the workplace is a massive, massive part of Are You OK? Because, through one organisation, you can touch so many people across there. And we've always taken like an open source approach. And so there's just so many examples of how people have done amazing jobs at growing the impact across the whole organisation, which suited their organisation.
So, the Are You OK approach really focuses on peers or individuals having that conversation about mental health and encouraging action when necessary. How do you feel that fits within a more holistic approach to workplace mental health?
It's only the start, and we've been hugely successful because we had that narrow vision to help start the conversation. And having those conversations is a critical element to changing the culture. But, you have to do more than that. To have a mentally healthy culture, you've really got to have what we call a we care culture. And that's where we champion self-care. So we build resilience for the individual for uncertain times. Crew care, which is building more psychologically safe and resilient teams. And red zone care, which is, how we reach out and support someone who's struggling, someone who's in that potentially Are You OK situation. And all those three things, and I think like anything, it's really around teams where you really start to, see change and impact. And, Gallup research tells us that 70% of the impact on engagement, well-being comes from the manager in the team. And so creating the right culture in a team is, having people feel they're connected, asking the question, are we connected? And what we want there is the outcome, we belong. The second question is, do we feel safe? And this is primarily about psychological safety. Do we have each other's back? If something goes wrong, do we learn from it, support each other and move forward quickly? And then the third element is asking the question, do we share a future? And this is involving the team and involving the direction that they're going in. And if a team, as you would know, has a strong sense of purpose, it really lifts well-being and quite frankly, success.
So what are some strategies that teams can use to start to build that?
I think it really comes down to a few things. And it works very well if you have a leader who is comfortable being vulnerable, who's comfortable saying, I don't know all the answers. Like, we're going to work on this stuff together. We've got to sort it out. And so if a leader does that, and as you know, I've got the Caring CEO podcast, and these amazing leaders aren't afraid to be vulnerable. They aren't afraid to say that, look, I struggle at times as well. So that's a really sound foundation. And the next thing I say, if we want to build connection, and this has, of course, been really challenged during COVID, asking the team, what are things we can do to increase the sense of connection, to increase the sense of belonging? And, and then to talk about, psychological safety. So psychological safety is where we can be authentic selves. There's interpersonal trust and respect. And we're not afraid to try things and know that if it goes wrong, that we back each other up, we learn from it and move forward. And then it's the same with the shared future. Psychologically safe teams, the members talk approximately equally in a team meeting. It's not a democracy, but people feel heard and feel that they've contributed to the eventual decision that's made about how we evolve our future. So, just asking those questions. And then on a one-on-one situation, one-on-one meetings, I think a great three questions which a leader can ask is, what is one thing that I'm doing which is really helping you? And then hearing what the employee says about that. Second question is, what's one thing I'm doing, but you'd like me to do it more, a lot more? And, you see an easy way to sort of lift the game. And then the final question is, what's one thing I can do to help with your sense of purpose and productivity and sense of contribution? And listen to that. So there are simple rituals that can make a huge difference to ensure a team is, has a sense of purpose and engagement.
And would leaders have that conversation sort of in the group setting, or would that tend to be more of a one-on-one setting?
The first one that I talked about, what's one thing you'd like me to do more? That's individual. So that's, hearing from an individual about what their thoughts and ideas are. But the other ones, a group sort of situations, just saying, look, the connection thing, what can we do? We tried the virtual Scrabble. We've done that. What else can we do? And, there's a fabulous publication put out by Atlassian, and it's called the 22 Great Ideas to Increase Connection in 2022. And, they're an organisation that has really been built on the virtual environment. In fact, they've already told everyone you never have to come back to the office. So they've learned through experience, what works in, building connections and that sense of we're in it together.
Yeah, and I think that there's a great opportunity to look to those organisations that are doing it well and learn from them as we're adapting to this idea of hybrid work and all of the pros and cons about
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell's got some strong thoughts on the topic.
it. He sure does.
What did he say? What did he say?
That if you're sitting at home in your pajamas all day, then is that what you've been reduced to? Yeah.
Yeah, he basically made a global statement that work from home is not good.
Yeah, and that you can't get meaning from a remote job.
Yeah, which sucks for Kevin, our CTO.
Yeah,
who
he's
works,
living a meaningless existence.
Yeah, an hour and a half north of the city.
Yeah, so, I should send him a link to that clip. Actually, he'd get a kick out of it.
Yeah, he would. He's got a good sense of humour. Hey, Graeme, one of the criticisms of how workplaces engage with Are You OK is often there's a lot of activity on the one day, and we've all seen the yellow shirts, the cupcakes, they have a speaker in, but that kind of like is where it begins and ends for some organisations. And we know that's not going to have meaningful change on the culture or, having the conversations regularly. So what's your advice for workplaces to get more out of Are You OK throughout the course of the year?
Yeah, and it's a fantastic point because, if you look on the website, it'll tell you what day Are You OK Day is, but the rest is just Are You OK messaging. And of course, our mission is Are You OK 365. Are You OK Day gives a point of focus and direction and ensures we get lots of profile, and that's also a really, really healthy thing. But some of those resources I mentioned previously about, how to have Are You OK champions across the whole organisation, how to build an Are You OK culture, and also having specific Are You OK events. So for example, we have an Are You OK Rail Day, and that's a different day. It's specifically for the rail industry. And TrackSafe, who is a peak body that looks after the well-being of all the public and private railway places, they help put together these resources. And it's just amazing how that's sort of built-in profile. And with Sydney Trains, for example, they've got 9,000 workers, 85% men and blokey men, and didn't feel comfortable, with talking about those sorts of things. But there's a guy called Mustafa. He was one of their, well-being and safety consultants. He just took it upon himself to really expand the process. And so, the first year they had like a pass the footy competition. They had a barbecue, which is always appreciated by hungry men. And, it was quite simple, but he has built it up over a period of time that he now visits, I think it's like 30 odd locations. And over a period of week, he makes an Are You OK Rail Week. He sees 6,000 of those 9,000 people. So that's a great example how an internal champion has just said, look, Are You OK's got a great concept, but let's also make sure it's relevant for us the whole year and things that people recognise. And, there's a couple of videos in the Are You OK website where he talks about that experience and about growing it, and also conversations that he's had with people on a train platform. There's one there, and, he just sort of asked this guy, Are you OK? And he said, oh, you're from management, aren't you? And he said, no, I'm generally interested in, how things. And it turned out But this guy's mother was quite severely disabled, and his siblings had drifted away and all this sort of stuff. And Mustafa just really asked questions, open-ended questions, and was able to make some suggestions, calling your EAP group, having that conversation. And anyway, he left and came back. He came back next week, and the guy said, "Wait, okay, Mustafa, come over here." He said, just can't tell you what's happened. I've been able to speak to my siblings. We've got something organised for Mum. My life is so much better. And he said, "I've been in this organisation for 21 years, and you're the first one that's ever asked me, are you okay?" So, these stories, these examples change culture for good. And if an organisation wants to really, really build the impact, they need to have their leaders talk about their personal experiences with mental health issues, whether for themselves or a loved one or a former colleague. And that can make a massive difference. Also, employees sharing their stories. Like you just said before that you've never had anyone talk about their lived experience. Well, there's 25% of the people on this show that have had a lived experience of depression, anxiety, or substance abuse, but they don't talk about it. And, sharing those stories gives people permission to share their stories. And I can tell you, they all have stories.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Graeme. I guess, as a campaign, like you said, it's a very narrow focus of what you've got, right? It's about just making people aware of how that conversation can potentially save a life. And like you say, having a dedicated day to it gets a lot of attention. I mean, I know you're book solid for the whole week, probably doing speaking presentations about Are You Okay for that week, and you get lots of media attention for that day. So there's a lot of focus on that. I guess the bit that's missing for some workplaces is going, hey, it's more than just a day. I think that sometimes gets lost, that it's actually about a continual process. If we're thinking about peer support or, being colleagues who
Yeah, very much so. And, we've produced some good resources for that as well. At wecare365.com.au, you'll find a Building a Mentally Healthy Culture checklist. And so what that has is 14 items in prepare, how to prepare to have a great launch. And then how do we have a great launch? What are the things we need to do to have huge impact across the organisation? But then most importantly, the third step is how do we build momentum over the next year ahead? What are things we do that keeps it continuing? And, it's about having a multi-year plan. Rome wasn't built in a day, which, really leads into your Flourish DX. It's a chance to measure it each year, each 6 months, whatever, and see if there is progress made or if we're going backwards in some area. Having a way to monitor it and look at things objectively is really, really important.
Yeah, measuring and continuous improvement is a bit that's often missed as well when people are just after a sugar hit of, hey, we're doing this thing, we've got people around, let's have fun and talk about this serious issue. But they kind of miss the follow through. But that kind of probably is a nice segue to Joelle's question about your WeCare 365, because that seems to be the bit that's missing. How do we make it scalable and something that's happening throughout the year rather than just a lot of focus on one day?
Yeah, so...
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
So how WeCare 365 happened was exactly what you pointed out there, Joelle and Jason. It was the realisation that just, are you okay? It's just about the conversation. And I knew from doing that research of 4,000 people that it needed to be broader than that. You needed to be able to identify someone, show compassion, and know how to direct them in the right help-seeking approach to make a difference. And so with WeCare 365, we sought to create an ecosystem of programs that could keep the momentum going for over a year. And so the first part of that is WeCare Manager. And so that's a 50-minute, really engaging e-learning program that you can access 24/7. And it also includes help sheets you can refer back to immediately. It's got a case study that runs through it. And then following it, people get 12 2-minute nudge videos. So once per week for 12 weeks, which remind people of one small part of the equation and encourage them to take action in their team. The idea then is to invite your team members to do We Care. And We Care is a 30-minute program, and it just goes into a lot more depth than Are You OK in terms of the help seeking. So, for example, in both those programs, you can find a help sheet on how to find a mental health savvy GP, how to prepare for a mental health discussion with a GP, psychologist, EAP, how to encourage someone who's really struggling to exercise when they don't feel like it. So it's just, very, very practical. And, our real mindset with these programs is to make them easily accessible, practical and ongoing. And then the third component is We Care Momentum. So this is a client team portal. And inside there are all the ideas about how to have a great launch. There's videos that can be shared across the organisation. There's newsletter copy, website copy. There's checklists and all that sort of thing. So it gives the team the best chance to make a real difference over a period of time. And funnily enough, I'm just doing a webinar in a couple of days about building a mentally healthy culture checklist just on this topic. And I asked people, what's your biggest challenge in building a mentally healthy culture checklist? And the biggest thing is getting executive leadership support. That's what these people feel. It's getting executive leadership support. And it's also about, how do I scale my impact? Like, I'm really busy. How do I scale it? So increasingly, we need to provide resources to people on how to address those two issues. As a former headhunter and recruitment consultant, I've always been quite adept at getting to speak to the right people in the right place. But I think in many ways, people who often have the responsibility for this is HR or HSE people. There can be some improvement on how to build your influence across the organisation and to win the budget or support that is needed. Like it's changing now, and COVID's made a big bit towards it. But I read a report, an Australia-wide report, that said that across the entire Australian workplace, $45 million was spent on wellbeing. This came out, it's one of those ISIS-type reports. But if you do the maths on that, it's like $3 a person. And but I think with the help of things like Flourish DX, you can make the argument that this is return on investment. It's also the right thing to do, not just for well-being, but also for productivity. But it also makes real sense from a practical thing to do.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about the letter R in the iCare framework, which is the revitalising work aspect of it. So we recognise that the good work is good for you, that work can very much be a protective factor for mental health. Yeah. Not always, unfortunately, but we know that typically people who are in work tend to experience better mental health outcomes than those who are not. I'm wanting really to have a look at also the role of work in actually helping people to recover from a mental illness or from a psychological injury, and in particular the types of accommodations that can be made to help people remain at work, ideally to help them actually improve their recovery prospects. Do you have some examples that you can share of accommodations that employers or managers can make for workers that will help to keep them at work while they're recovering?
Yeah, there's a real partnership involved with those discussions. And so, for the line manager, with the person that reports to him says, look, I understand you're struggling. It's difficult at the moment. I want to work with you. And but it has to be a partnership. I really want to listen and help, but you've also got to share with me what's really going on. And that way is the best opportunity to really get the right strategies together. And so part of that is saying, do you feel okay working, a conventional 35, 40 hours a week? And they may say, no. I have to get to see quite a few mental health sessions with my psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever. And so freely talking about that and letting people know it's okay to take time off. It's okay to reduce workload. But it's also, asking the person who is struggling to be proactive and say, what can happen to help? So the sense of partnership, the sense of workload adjustment if necessary, the hours if necessary, so you can see mental health specialists. Like anything, it's good communication. And fundamental to that is managers knowing that this is really important in terms of having a successful outcome.
Yeah, and I think that it's so important for leaders to recognise that people can't actually compartmentalise, between an experience outside of work and their experience of work. What's going on at home impacts how you are at work, regardless of if those two things are not related at all. And the way that work responds to those, those big life events that we all experience, can have such a profound impact on how we're able to recover from those, or whether we're able to recover from those. If I think about myself, and I had a significant bereavement a little while ago, and my boss just said, well, take as much time as you need, and if I needed to take a day off or a half day off, that was fine. I wasn't expected to produce at the same sort of volume and pace in my work that I had been previously, with the recognition that it was just giving me the space that I needed to get through that process of grieving until I was at a point where I could actually come back to my normal level of performance. But if those are, and they were very informal, but if that hadn't happened, my risk of actually then moving into depression would have been significant.
And that's a great example, Joelle, just where someone does that. And it also dramatically increases your commitment to that person, doesn't it? You feel, boy,
absolutely,
you went out of your way to help me. I want to reciprocate. And it is very much a reciprocal situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we had Daniel recently give us a good example, being a plumber by trade and owning his own business, and the accommodations that he was able to make for some of the people in his team who are going through a hard time or what have you. And just like Joelle was saying, it just makes you so much more committed to the organisation, because you can see they really value as a person, not just as a dollars and cents contributor.
You're just showing you care, and that it counts. For so much. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt or someone who said, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And there's never been a truer sentence spoken. Yeah.
Hey, Graeme, we've been speaking a little bit offline about peer support programs and how they can be improved. And just last month on an episode, Alicia and myself, we did a special just on peer support programs and some of these issues. I know you probably haven't heard the episode yet, because actually it came out the day that we're recording. So I doubt you would have been sitting by your podcast of choice and going, when's it going to come out so I can download it and listen to it? And poor Jack, he released it late today. It's supposed to come out at 2 a.m. It came out at 10 a.m.
Constantly dropping the ball.
Dropping the ball, Jack. Forget everything nice we've ever said about Jack. But can you give us some of your ideas about what do you think in a formal peer support program? We talked about, are you okay conversations, they're largely informal, right? But in a formal peer support programs, what are some of the required elements to make it effective?
I think one of the big things is having an executive sponsor, someone in the organisation that believes that this is really important, and a senior person who's influential and trusted. That's the sort of person that has to be, I believe, really behind it to make a big difference. the second thing is to link it to the vision and values of the organisation. And what that does is to show that this isn't something separate. This is integral to the way we work around here. And look how our values revolve around this, saying that people are our most important asset. And then the peer support people, you need a scalable way to train them, on how to have great competence and having that conversation and access to all those help sheets to assist a person who could be going through a tough time. I think that there's very little being done on this, but this is also really important for people to be able to nominate the peer support people on the things that they want to talk about. So, someone might, experience OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and want to speak just about that because that's where they feel they've got expertise. Someone else might do something else. Someone might want to avoid certain topics. And so having a way where peer support people can nominate, their preferences and that sort of thing is, I think, important for a really sustainable program. And also having a venue where they can check in with each other. Because one of the things about being put in that position, and people sometimes think they're ready for it, but they're not when they actually start, is that some people can have a real sense of overwhelm. They can hear these horrible stories, really challenging stories, and it really impacts their own mental health. And so it's very important to have both an informal and a formal process to check in with the peer support people and just ask how they're going. Are they okay? And then, also being able to post questions with each other, on a dedicated group for the peer support. I've got this person going through bipolar. Anyone else had experience with this? They're finding it hard to focus. So really be able to share information across that whole group. And and don't believe that culture changes in a month or a year. It's a multi-year project to build strong peer support. There's one group in Sydney, it's the Justice Department, and they've had a formal mental health peer support program going for 26 years. Has to be one of the longest in the world, I think.
Wow. Yeah. That first thing that you mentioned there, Graeme, is something that you mentioned earlier in the show as well, about that importance of getting executive buy-in and an executive sponsor to make sure that this program actually has legs. And when you go for budget, there's someone advocating, year on year for that. Because like you say, it's a year on year process. It's not like you do it for a year and then that's it. Hopefully we would have recorded with Stephen, and that episode hopefully maybe even would have aired before this one, I think.
Should do, yeah.
Yeah. So listeners can go back to that, and he'll be giving some advice about how to speak the language of the board and the exec to try and get them on the same page. And one of the things that we've spoken about as well, Graeme, is that importance of, hey, if you're going back year on year to get budget to support your peer support program, then you need data around how is it being utilised and what are the benefits that are coming out of that. If you're not measuring it, it's unlikely you're going to continue to get that budget year on year. So, hopefully I see in the future, Graeme, hopefully an opportunity to integrate We Care and Flourish DX where, you can take care of that training at scale, as you say, is an important need. And then we can help with that measurement piece around how is your peer support program actually functioning and, help you to continue to improve that peer support program and how it's functioning year on year and make sure that you're giving the right data to your exec and board so they can continue to see the benefit of doing that and continue to fund it.
So having a look at, you've given us there the key elements for a peer support program to be effective. Where are the elements that you find companies typically trip over in their implementation?
I think just not giving it enough time to think about all the really important components. And that was one of our motivations to put that checklist together. Just really thinking about how we build this over time, how we build a coalition across the organisation that really want to champion this. And it takes tenacity. But one of the things that people should also be aware of is just because they're a board director, just because they're in the C-suite, doesn't mean they haven't had their own issues as well. there was research published by Deloitte just a couple of months ago that actually showed, and they looked at, mental health at the C-suite versus employees. They actually showed that the C-suite was more overwhelmed, more lonely, and more depressed than employees. And so knowing that, when you approach a board, as I always do, I talk about my struggle, and I said, does anyone else here, know someone or has really struggled? And I guarantee everyone on that board will know that. And so that's a really, really good understanding. And then to say, well, that if you're going through it personally, you feel ashamed, you think you're the only one doing it. Even when you try and look after a loved one, you feel alone. But, as we've seen, this touches all of us. And if you want a business case, the report put out by Atlassian and PwC said that mental health is the number one societal issue that employees care about. And if they see their employee doing something about one of those societal issues, the level of engagement goes from 54% up to 89%. So that's one thing. And then just also in this year, Microsoft put out a report about successful hybrid work and identified 3 things that were critical to successful hybrid work. One was a positive culture. Well, hello. But 2 was mental health, and 3 was a sense of purpose. And I would argue that, to have a positive culture, we need to have mental health, and mental health also improves with having a sense of purpose and culture. So even if they're looking purely from business perspective, there's overwhelming evidence that just shows that this isn't a nice to have, well-being, feel-good, kumbaya moment. This is about how we work better together to have a better organisation and better results.
And so do you see opportunities for improvement, key opportunities for improvement for organisations? So if we've got listeners who are sort of responsible for their peer support program, what suggestions would you have for them to look at?
I'd really look at influence. And there's a wonderful book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And he looks at all the, research around this topic, and he comes up with 6 things that have been shown to really influence other people. And, and you find on YouTube that there's a 5-minute video that gives you a summary of that. But in essence, it's looking like, social proof, for example, saying that, I just heard that Microsoft Australia, the CEO of that cares so much about mental health, he decided to start the Corporate Mental Health Alliance. I heard from Shane Elliott, the CEO of ANZ, that building that culture of care and high performance is really central to sustained performance. And, what can we do about this? How can we join those ranks, learn from those ranks to improve things? So the influence side of things, I think, is really critical. And it's also building this coalition. You might get knockbacks here, but if you reach out and, share that you're really wanting to help build and improve the mental health across the organisation, you'll find that the most surprising people can come forward. And it's strength in numbers. The more you have, the easier it'll get to raise it up and up the agenda, but more importantly, to get the funds, the budget to be able to do it. There's no doubt that if mental health and resilience isn't on the CEO's agenda, they're not doing their job.
Mm.
And also psych health and safety.
Yes.
Yes. Out of those 3 things, that's the legal obligation. And then the other stuff is the moral obligation. We care, and we can see the business benefits of it as well.
And you raise a really good point. This new standard, 45003 ISO, it's basically should be a warning for directors and also senior leadership that this is going to be a legal requirement. And I saw last year that the French Telecom, French Telecom went to Orange and went through this massive transformation process, which over a period of 5 years led to something like 21 suicides across the whole organisation. The CEO and 3 of the executive team went before a criminal court to be accountable for that. And that potential exists if if leaders don't do the right thing.
Yeah, that's right. The France Telecom one is one that I often quote just to show, hey, directors can be held accountable, and definitely under manslaughter laws, industrial manslaughter laws, directors can be held accountable for these things in Australia as well. And just to be clear with our listeners, in Australia there is legislation already that states that companies have to manage psychosocial risk. ISO 45003 is a voluntary standard, but by adopting ISO 45003, you would be actually adopting most of the legal requirements except for reporting requirements.
Yeah, there's some funny idiosyncrasies with different aspects of the legislation, but from a comprehensive safe system of work that actually shows that you're identifying your hazards, assessing your risks, and maintaining that continuous improvement cycle, then adopting the ISO standard will basically demonstrate that you're meeting all of those duties.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Graeme, it's been a fantastic conversation. We're not going to let you leave yet. One of the questions that we like to ask all our guests is, if you were to look into the future, what would your hopes for the future of workplace mental health be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it is managers and team members owning it, just saying, really communicating and just saying, how can we do this? How can we improve our sense of connection and belonging? How can we, have psychologically safe conversations and be vulnerable and try new things? And then how do we evolve the future? It really happens at that team level. And of course, each manager and each employee can contribute to that.
Terrific.
And do you have any words of advice for listeners who are interested in working in the field of psychological health and safety?
Yeah, it's something that I share in all my keynotes. That I've read a lot about this topic, talked a lot about this topic, and I think it can be summarised in 3 sentences and 8 words, which is on the screen behind me. To go in there, to be caring, to lead with care, and to grow with care.
Succinct. Thank you.
I like it. Could be a short clip.
Could be. A very short clip.
I could expand on it.
Yeah, no, that's terrific, Graeme. No, look, really appreciate you. You're a man in demand. You're obviously got a very busy, particularly early part of September. So glad that we're able to record in advance of that. But thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing with our listeners what you've been up to.
My pleasure, Jason and Joelle. I know you have some listeners in Canada, and this Monday I'm heading off for a 2.5-week holiday in Canada, and very much looking forward to that.
Well, the good thing is our listeners won't mob you at the airport because this will come out after your Canadian trip. You'll be back in Australia by the time this comes out.
That's the only reason.
Yeah, that's the only reason, yeah. Otherwise, there'd be hundreds of people there.
Camped out.
And the other thing just to mention for your North American listeners is that we have a group over there implementing the We Care program. It's a group called Mental Health Innovations, and they're based in Canada. So there is options for Canadian organisations to put this in their own group as well.
Yeah, actually on that, Graeme, where's the best place for listeners to reach out to you if they want to find out more information about We Care or We Care 365 or Are You OK?
Yeah, well, for myself, it's definitely LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I'll always get back to people who reach out to me. Secondly, as I mentioned, there's some good resources on wecare365.com.au. There's the capacity there to look at a demo or to, speak to one in our team. And Are You OK has got some really wonderful resources at ruok.org.au. And, some really, really terrific stuff there. And for all the listeners here in Australia, I hope you have a fantastic Are You OK day.
Fantastic. Thanks, Graeme. And we'll make sure to drop those links into the show notes as well.
Yes, we will.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Graeme. Listeners, that brings us to the end of this episode. So don't forget, we do record this over video when we have our amazing guests on. So if you do want to check out the video, not this one probably because you've just listened to the whole thing if you're at this point, but you will be able to check it out on the Flourish DX YouTube channel. We also take short clips and we'll put them on the Flourish DX LinkedIn page, and that's from all three of our podcasts, the Psych Health and Safety Australia, Canada, and USA one. And then while you're on LinkedIn, like Graeme said, he will probably respond if you reach out to him, as will Joel and myself. So feel free to slide into our DMs. But that's it, listeners. We will catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.